Welcome to video clip 3 for ECO736 week 7. We are looking at public spending on the poor. So the last clip ended rather abruptly. I was just trying to remind you that when it comes to concentration coefficients, the more negative the coefficient is, the better it is. It means it's more pro-poor. If you have a concentration coefficient that is positive, it is in fact pro-rich. So take a look at this table that compares concentration coefficients of public spending between 2000 and 2006 across different functional categories of public spending. And you can see exactly which of those areas, school education, tertiary education, all social grants, health, housing, you can see by looking at the concentration coefficient which of those are more pro-poor and which of those spending categories are more pro-rich. Once again, tertiary education and housing stands out as not being pro-poor. It is only weakly redistributive. While the other categories are fairly well targeted, they are per capita redistributive and they are pro-poor. You can spend some time right now analyzing this table, looking at concentration indices in South Africa and how it compares to concentration indices in other developing countries by different functional category. When we look at more recent concentration coefficients for public spending, specifically derived from the World Bank in 2015, you can clearly see that free basic services such as transfers, child support grants, primary care, old age pensions, they are very negative in the concentration coefficients, so they are well targeted at the poor. But when you look at spending, for example, on tertiary education, you can see those coefficients are positive. So they're actually favoring the rich. And free basic services, which are indirect subsidies, not direct subsidies, also have a potential to be pro-rich, but not as badly as tertiary education. This slide focuses on the features of households at the bottom and top ends of the income distribution. We're dealing specifically with deciles, so looking at the poorest 10% and the richest 10%. In terms of the percentage of households with children younger than 18, you can see in the poorest decile it is far higher at 66% compared to 37% in the richest decile. Furthermore, you can look at the per capita annual income before taxes and cash transfers. That's what we would refer to as primary income. Extremely low in the poorest decile and over 207,000 in the richest decile. And if you look at this per capita annual income after taxes and the addition of cash transfers, etc., you can see a clear increase in the secondary income for the poorest decile, while if you look at the richest decile, you'll see their secondary income has decreased compared to the primary income. Why do you think that is the case? If you guess taxes, you are 100% correct. Now, while incidence analyses are helpful, they also come with limitations. Often the benefits in kind may not reflect the consumer preference, so they might be getting something from the state that they don't really want. In addition, fiscal resource shifts are not the same as real resource shifts. So in other words, even though the budget may be reallocated to different different functional categories, a lot of those resources could merely go into increases in salaries and not, for example, purchasing increased equipment for hospitals, for example. Probably the most important limitation of incidence analysis is that it ignores service quality. So what the true need is for shifts in outcomes, not merely shifts in fiscal resources. We can keep reallocating our budget, but if that doesn't translate into improvements in the outcomes, then what benefit is it? Thus, it's very important to understand the link between inputs and outputs. And this issue is of particular importance when looking at in-kind transfers in the space of education and health, and we'll be covering this over the next 2 to 3 weeks. More often than not, the issue of quality is not addressed in this spending. Benefits are received by individuals that is equal to the amount spent per capita. But because the quality of school infrastructure, teachers, health clinics and hospitals is so variable across the country, there is no guarantee that the actual performance and outcomes will be as we expect. And what has rather happened is that it has been quite disappointing. So the funds that have been put in has not translated into outputs that are an improvement in the outcomes. So in conclusion, in the South African context, there are inherited inequalities, and this emphasizes the state's redistributive role. Fiscal research shifts are necessary, but they are insufficient for improved outcomes due to weak social delivery. The budget as it stands is very redistributive, so there is rather limited scope for improving it. Targeting is done mainly through 3 mechanisms: your means testing for your grants. Poor have more children, so they benefit more from basic education subsidies, and the affluent avoid public health services, so they do not benefit from those healthcare subsidies. Since the 2000s, we have seen a shift in incidence, but there's not much targeting shifts within sectors, but rather shifts within social spending to social grants, which are the best targeted, away from tertiary education, which is the worst targeted. We have to add a clause here because since fees must fall, we have found that there has been a shift in incidence in terms of what government is spending for tertiary education, and that has meant that more rich people are benefiting from this resource shift than the poor. The main concerns that we should continue to have regarding government social spending are the many inefficiencies of social delivery in health and education, and also potentially the behavioral consequences of expanding the grant system. Thank you very much for your time, students. Oh, sorry, there's one more point. Less strict means test implies weaker targeting of grants, because there has been some propositions made where we should do away with the means test because it's too administratively burdensome and expensive, and rather just give the grants to everyone according to minimal criteria. But if that were to happen, it would not be well targeted at the poorest of the poor, and you might have an error of inclusion. So I'll see you on Thursday in the discussion forum. Come with your questions and answers, and be sure to continue working on your practical, your assignment 6, your weekly reading assignment 6, and also you should have started working on your essay because that's also due pretty soon. Until Thursday, goodbye.